Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome to the final episode of the Lyoko Retrospectives. And today, we're going to be taking a look at the series finale of Code Lyoko itself, Echoes. And for the final episode of the series, we are in for a treat. They are pulling out all the stops, doing everything in their power to make this possibly the most exciting 24 minutes of television that you will ever see. It's a clip show. Yeah. This episode of Code Lyoko is a clip show. Although the framing device, I think, is a rather interesting one that I feel is somewhat poetic for the final episode. Essentially, after the defeat of Xana in the last episode, the Lyoko group has been the Lyoko group's obviously realized that there's no threat anymore. They don't need the supercomputer anymore, so they can just go ahead and turn it off, which Yumi, of course, is excited for and is more than ready to just move on, just get rid of it and move on. But the rest of the group, for one reason or another, are having issues, and as a result of this, many of them are pretty much all of them, save Yumi, all are kind of second guessing whether they should turn it off or not. Of course, when they put it to a vote and they all outvote Yumi, Yumi does want an explanation, or well, no, she doesn't really want an explanation. She's just kind of fuming. And it's over the course of the episode that we learn each of the characters' various reasons, them reflecting on how Lyoko affected them, changed them, all the battles they've gone through, and ultimately how by the end they've realized that how for all the negatives they've experienced, there was a lot of positives too, and the end is not truly the end. So that's just kind of the general plot of the episode, with them pretty much with the clips pretty much working in as them reminiscing of their time on Lyoko until they all come to the conclusion that maybe we should just turn it off. But of course, it's still Code Lyoko, so aside from the A plot, we also have our standard, not really important B plot. And the B plot is that Sissy places a tracker on Ulrich during, I think, breakfast? I think it was breakfast or lunch, I don't remember. And pretty much, and as she figures out that the group is meeting at the factory, and as such, when the group leaves the factory after Yumi is outvoted, Sissy goes to the factory herself and finds Jeremy's terminal and finds his video diary as he talks about all the things that happened over the course of the series. And watching this pretty much just pushes her over the edge and results in her storming back to the school and demanding that her father call someone and lock up the group. Of course, he thinks she's crazy because she's talking about all the adventures they've had, about how monsters were already virtualized, how her dad was possessed, how there were vines sticking out, how people were lost in the supercomputer, yada yada yada, blah blah blah. Pretty much, her dad thinks she's crazy and is just ready to lock her up. And as a result, Jeremy has to launch a return to the past, and the group gets surrounded by just saying, "Look, if you want," with the group telling Sissy, "Look, if you want to be a friend, you should just stop trying to spy on us and split us up," which results in Sissy saying, "Wait, we're friends? Oh, okay, well, okay, have fun. Well, see you later, guys." Whatever. But yeah, by the end, the group realizes, yeah, they're better off turning off the supercomputer, and so the group, now unanimous, does eventually turn off the computer. And as they're leaving, they run into Jim, who asks what they're doing, and so Odd says, "We're just closing another chapter on our lives full of heroics and bravery." And Jim's like, "Yeah, I did that the day. Yeah, I've done that the day I had to grow up. The day I had to make the choice to become an adult." And the group jokingly says, "You were an adult, Jim? You're actually an adult, Jim?" And he says, "I'd rather not talk about it." And the episode ends with the Lyoko warriors pretty much giving the audience a wave farewell. So, did I hate the? I don't know. Did I hate the episode? Not really, but I don't think I care for it either. I was actually preparing myself for this episode to be complete garbage, if I'm being honest. As I was getting close to the end of the series, I did end up seeing a tweet from, I think either Code Lyoko screenshots or some other Code Lyoko account on Twitter. I'll have to look back on that. But pretty much said that apparently this episode gets a lot of hate because it's essentially because it is essentially a clip show. Which, I saw that and I was just kind of preparing myself for the worst, but honestly, watching it, while I feel like it could have been a lot better and it should have dedicated more time to the characters reaching their conclusions on them finally deciding they should turn off the supercomputer, honestly, the framing device isn't a bad one, and a lot of the decisions they make are actually do fit with their characters, and they do have some actually interesting reasons. Some of them are more simple than others, but a lot are more complex, and none of them are bad. So it's actually kind of cool seeing that, and I'll get more into their decisions when I wrap up this vlog, because obviously I'm going to talk about my feelings on the series. But I thought it was all rather interesting, and while the clips were and not all the clips were just there to kind of were used in relation to the characters and why they were personally invested in keeping the supercomputer on. So I actually thought that was really cool. I actually thought that was interesting. And of course, the big problem though is that there's not really much to it. It's just we get brief snippets of the characters talking, and while the character bits are nice, as we see them just talk and work and help each other work through everything and come to the conclusion, okay, yeah, it's probably best that we do actually turn this thing off. At the same time, it still feels a little rushed, and as you do with the clip show, a lot of the footage is, of course, reused from old episodes. Of course, it's using the flashback format, but again, it doesn't really help in the long run. It doesn't making a more structured story, especially in the case where the present day stuff feels it doesn't have as much grounding as it should. Again, not bad though. Some of the framing device again isn't a bad story, and the brief snippets we get are nice. I do actually like them. It helps add more to the character, and I do feel like it does round out the characters and their journeys. Just seeing them all kind of register the fact that this thing that's been such a prominent part of their lives for a long time is now going to be gone, and how they're all processing that. So for some of them, it's not going to be a big change, and by some of them I mean Yumi and William. For the rest of them, though, this is something that, for one reason or another, has affected their lives in great ways, and they're probably just wondering, how are we going to go forward with this thing gone? But by the end of the episode, they all come to the conclusion, all this thing is just a chapter in our lives. And just because it's closing doesn't mean that we can't continue on. Which I think is really nice, very heartfelt. And while I feel like it could have done a little bit more, at the same time, it's not awful. I think it's just the biggest problem is that it's because of the clip show, most of the stuff is done through flashbacks with only little action. I feel like we could have had more time to that. So I do like that. It serves as like a nice little epilogue, which I feel like is something the series definitely really needs for when it comes down to their plots, which again I'll get to when I talk about I'll talk about when I get to my feelings on the series overall. But I do feel like the framing device isn't bad. It's just that its biggest problem is that it's a clip show, which as a result doesn't really feel as whole as it should be. It definitely just feels like they're trying to just put that stuff in there for action, even though it doesn't really matter anymore. Just again, for character stuff, it's fine, really does work, but it's a clip show, so take what you can, take the good, the bad, I guess. It's a clip show is never usually the best, and of course, another big problem, B-plot with Sissy really does not matter, so I don't really have much else to say about this episode, which I think sucks, because this is supposed to be the final episode. Which I feel like another problem, too, is that maybe some subplots didn't get resolved. I don't know. I feel like that's a minor thing at best. I think only like one major subplot didn't get a full resolution. So I'll talk about, but I don't know. I feel again I didn't hate this episode, but I didn't love it either. It's just for the final episode of Code Lyoko, especially if they were trying to bill it as like an epilogue episode, it could have been better. It could have been a lot better. It does definitely have a finality to it, and it does feel like things are finally coming to an end, which I feel is nice, especially as we see the characters trying to wrap their heads around it, but yeah, there's not really much else I can talk about, which I feel kind of sucks, because Code Lyoko did feel like it had a lot more to offer to it, especially with a finale, but overall, though, this finale is just not awful, not great, it's not god awful, but it's not amazing either. It's just just which I think is kind of the best summation of it. Which is both kind of interesting, but also kind of disappointing, because as an epilogue, I think it does well in reflecting on the show and all the journeys the characters went on to reach this point. How each of them have been affected by Lyoko in one way, shape, or form. Even if those reactions are brief and so yeah, just brief. So I feel like that there could have been more time dedicated to that. Maybe have more of the episode of them contemplating this, having them go over this sort of thing. Maybe see how it's affected school and their lives interpersonally. And again, they do show that. It's just like I wish we could have had a little bit more. But then again, what can you expect from an epilogue? That there's only so much you can actually show. But at the end of the day, it's you take what you can get, I suppose. I really wish I could say more about the finale because there is a lot to like about Code Lyoko that could easily be reflected on. And even the stuff with Sissy, I feel like could have been done better if if they didn't do a Return to the Past and maybe had to realize how much crap these kids went through just to reach the point where they are now, to the point where she decides, you know what, I'll just keep my mouth shut. I think that would have been so much better than her just saying, I want them locked up. And to be fair, the whole thing was started because Jeremy turned on the supercomputer, but the group went through a lot of crap to try and undo the mistake, especially with saving Aelita, who was trapped in there, and then, of course, them trying to keep her free from it so they could turn it off, and how that ultimately resulted in Xana getting worse. Like, it was technically their fault, but they fought tirelessly to undo that mistake, which I think is very commendable and noble. So I would have liked it if that part of the plan had registered at least. So I feel like that's another problem because I feel like that the subplot with Sissy could have been like a capstone for her character, but instead it's just Sissy up to her usual antics, and how it gets resolved is the same way that all B plots, well, not all, but most B plots in Code Lyoko are solved, with them just kind of writing it off, undoing everything, and then just making sure that never happened. So, yeah. I really just suppose that I want to say more. I really do want to say more about the episode because honestly, when it comes to Code Lyoko, there is a lot to like, and there is a lot, but there's also some things that I think could be improved on. As a whole, Code Lyoko as a show is a show that I love to watch, but it's also a show I hate talking about. I'm just going to say this right now. While I loved going back through Code Lyoko and watching it episode by episode over the last 2 years, it is not a show that I like vlogging about. Unlike other shows that I've done vlogs on, like Ben 10 or Danny Phantom or hell, even the Marvel Cinematic Universe, what made Code Lyoko kind of a chore for me to do as a vlog was because each episode was exceedingly formulaic. One of the major problems with Code Lyoko, in my opinion, was that when it came down to story, that was always just the story was always pushed on the back burner. The story was just there to get the group to the action and the stuff with Xana. That, as a result, a lot of subplots and B-plots and so forth, where you would usually be introduced and set up in the show, but then would get thrown to the sidelines when the action began. And then by the time that the action was stopped and fixed and the bad guy was beaten, whatever B-plot they were worrying about would be finished. They would have found a way to resolve it just like that without the characters having to put in much effort. And as a result, it usually felt like that there wasn't a lot to get invested in. Now, to be okay in the terms of story, so and as a result, there wasn't really a lot you could talk about. And when it came down to general consensus of how an episode would progress, it was essentially like Power Rangers in that regard. Like, every episode would be like this. B-plot starts up. Characters deal with B-plot. They're realizing that, okay, how are we going to fix this? Xana launches an attack. They realize, this ain't important, go deal with that thing. They go to Lyoko. They fight off thing in real world. Lyoko group fights off monsters in Lyoko. In the real world, Threat almost kills them. In Lyoko, they just manage to get rid of the monsters and deactivate the tower. Threat in real world is stopped just before it can kill someone. Reset time. B-plot resolved without any major effort. Rinse and repeat. Which I honestly kind of did not like. It was something that I really did not like when I went back and rewatched Code Lyoko, when I rewatched Code Lyoko. Now, to be fair, what made it more tolerable was the fact that the threat each episode was always unique and interesting, and I would be lying if I said that the tension when the threat got close to killing the main characters or seeing everyone backed against the wall as this thing or whatever threat was looming on the outside, or was just on the cusp of killing them, or they would all be real, or they'd all realize, oh crap, if we lose this, we're all gonna die. That actually had legitimate tension and made me want to see, and made me go, come on, get to that tower, turn this off. That always brought tension brought tension. But when you actually try and sit down and talk about it episode by episode, there's only so much you can talk about when plot-wise nothing progresses. Everything by the end is reset, figuratively and literally. They had the return to the past. So always, whenever there be some problem that that you think they'd have to find a way to overcome, enters Xana and his wacky tacky shenanigans, and boom, they're done. And boom, they can stop that. Return to the past. Suddenly, the problem in the real world's not a problem anymore. They fixed that. It's all good. Which, yeah, I think is a problem. Which I think is a problem. So the show sacrificed the story for the action. Now, again, do not misunderstand. Unlike other shows that like to sacrifice story for action, the action is not bad and it's not rushed. It definitely has enough character stuff and character moments to make you feel like that you're still watching a complete story, that you don't feel cheated. Like, let's say the Ben 10 reboot, which has fast action, but when it comes to story, they just like to rush through things just so they can get back to the action. And for Code Lyoko's case, they do like to pace themselves on the action and on the action and story beats. When the characters are dealing with something that's dangerous, they do like to showcase how the characters think and plan and how they interact with each other as they try and overcome it. Whereas with something like the Ben 10 reboot, it's just kind of rushed. They just kind of rush through everything until they can get back to what they think the little kids love. So that I will still comment for that. But like I said, the stuff with the B plots typically has no impact on the A plots. No, the characters don't. 9 times out of 10, or okay, let's say 8 times out of 10, the B plot doesn't really affect the characters. It's just something that occurs, it gets fixed, and the characters learned nothing to overcome it. So I feel like that is a problem, and when you have a series set up like that, and then you have someone like me who decided to sit down and watch it, yeah, that's and vlog about it. There's only so much you can talk about before you start repeating yourself, and that was a problem that I continuously faced while I was vlogging. With that being said, because I know I'm probably going to make a lot of people, probably going to piss a lot of people off, and so let me try and counteract that. While vlogging about the show definitely made me go, actually watching it, it's not a bad show. At all. For all the stuff they sacrifice in the story department, in the stuff that they actually excel in, it's very well done. The premise of the show is a very unique and interesting one. Going to a virtual world and facing off against monsters, gaining power as well in the world, then having what happens in the virtual world have an impact on what happens in the real world. The action itself is very impressive and well animated, especially in Lyoko. When you see the characters get new powers and how they access it, the escalating threat was very interesting and very interesting and kept you on the edge of your seat, both in individual episodes and overarching. You always kept wondering how they were going to solve this, how they were going to survive this until they could deactivate the tower, or in the case of when Xana was learning and getting more powerful, how they would be able to overcome whatever threat he was bringing about. I feel like that was a great way to keep you engaged, because stuff like that definitely made me more excited to see where the show was going. Because, like I said, when I was a kid, I didn't see the end of Code Lyoko, and certain episodes I definitely missed, especially for important story stuff, like when they introduced William. That is something that I think is very interesting and helps create a more complete picture and makes one want to come back for more. And in that regard, I did like watching Code Lyoko. But then of course another aspect that works, the characters. the characters, I think, while the stories that themselves didn't really offer much for the characters to grow, the character interactions and their individual arcs definitely made them feel complete. Every character was unique and distinct and had their own personalities, own unique character interactions, their own arcs as the series went on, and by the end you do feel like that Lyoko has had a positive impact on each of them in one way or another. So by the end, which is why another reason why I don't hate this episode, because seeing them reflect on all that and just kind of think how Lyoko will affect how their lives will be with Lyoko gone, I think that really does work and makes you invested in where the show will go from here on. So not the show, from their lives from here on. I like that. I like seeing that and having watched all 95 episodes plus the Xana Awakens two-parter. I agree. It's going to be kind of hard to figure out where they're going to go now. Although if Code Lyoko Evolution is anything to go by, they don't leave the supercomputer off forever, so I guess there's that. I don't know. But I do like that. And of course, one major aspect of the show that I think really does work, the villain. Xana is an awesome villain. Xana, from beginning to end, was always... You know what? Let's go over why Xana works. Why Xana works is because, as a villain, he's intelligent, he's smart, he's creative, and he's cruel. One of the reasons why I liked seeing Xana in the beginning of the season, or the series, was because Xana, to me, felt like the Faceless. A villain that you didn't know anything about, that you didn't understand his true motives, but you knew that whatever Xana was, it was malevolent, because whenever Xana would interact with the real world, he would always unleash some great peril that was designed to kill a lot of people. And likewise, when the Lyoko group went to his domain in Lyoko, Xana would always unleash monsters to attack them or hurt them. While you didn't understand Xana's true motives, at the same time, you got the impression that he was you got the impression that whatever Xana was, he was not kind, and because he didn't have a personality to go with the face, it definitely made you more afraid of him, because as we've established, the less you know about something, the more scary it is. And so having Xana just be like that eye symbol that always would pop up, you knew that whenever that thing was there, Xana was listening, and he was ready to strike, and he was ready to kill. With that being said, though, even Xana got a personality as the series went on, even if we only saw it briefly. And while there were times when I felt like that could have disturbed his level of intrigue and as a villain, honestly, I think it worked to his benefit. In Xana's early appearances, when we actually saw him when we actually saw a personality forming, the personality we saw was cold, distant, calculating, not really fully understanding the human animal. To take an example, in an early episode when Yumi was trapped by one of those one of the Xana's orb monsters, I forgot what it was called. It was barely used in the series, so I don't remember its name. But when Xana unleashed one of those and trapped Yumi on Lyoko and sent a replica in her place, that replica was the first instance where we saw a bit of Xana's personality. And the Yumi replica was not a good replica personality-wise. It was usually just standing back and watching, not really being able to mirror a lot of Yumi's personality, not fully understanding the group dynamics beyond the most basic stuff. The Yumi clone always followed a basic chain of logic, like when Sissy hit on Ulrich and she said, "Just date her. Go ahead. Just date her." Like, that seems like the most logical thing. But at the same time, you saw this determination and anger when things didn't go her way. You saw that behind this cold, distant personality was hatred. Just pure, unbridled hatred. And it was small, but as the series went on, that hatred grew. And we saw that as early as Xana's next personality appearance during the Ghost Channel episode, when Xana trapped the Lyoko warriors in his own little replica of Katic University, and Xana himself took on the role of Jeremy. through the Jeremy copy in the Ghost Channel, we saw more of that cold, distant personality, but we also saw another emotion come through. Schadenfreude. When through Jeremy, we saw that Xana was cold and distant and didn't give a damn about the Lyoko group beyond the most basic interactions, but if they suffered, he smiled. He found joy in it. He was more cold and calculating, more definitely playing the angles. And when Jeremy finally virtualized himself into Lyoko to get access to the Ghost Channel, he thought it was a win because now he had the whole set. And then as the series went on, another aspect that made Xana work, he always learned. He never tried the same thing twice unless he put a spin on it to make it different. Xana always learned from his mistakes, and as the series went on, he got smarter. Not just because of the whole Return to the Past thing, which as we learned in season 2 was actually making him stronger. Which, yeah, I've come to accept that. But at the same time, as the series went on, he began to understand the human animal more and more, how they interacted, how they worked off of each other, to the point where when he had to blend in and work with the people and work with the people in the real world, he was able to put up a more convincing act. Like, case in point, when he was impersonating Jeremy in the Ghost Channel episode, he definitely did not get the inflections right. He was more like he was just himself, cold, distant, only taking joy in the suffering of others. Whereas later on, in another episode, when he creates a polymorphic clone of Jeremy so he can infiltrate Caddick and get to Aelita and send her to the supercomputer, he puts on a more convincing act. He actually manages to keep it up. When he's in front of the group, he mimics Jeremy's inflections perfectly, acts patient around them. Even when he insists, we gotta get Aelita to the factory, he says, but well, come on, but I'm sorry, Jeremy, we got classes. He's like, okay, cool. And the instant he's out of sight from them, you can see him seething because Xana is impatient. In fact, the only times that I think Xana has ever shown an outburst of emotion is when things aren't going his way. The majority of the time, he can be calm and collected and cold and calculating, but the instant things start going wrong, he gets angry. The dude is just pure hatred and anger incarnate. And as the series went on, he always tried thinking outside the box. He would always... while you never actually saw him have that aha moment, you could tell through his interactions and what he was doing that he was clearly learning from his mistakes and trying to think of new ways to outsmart the group. And the thing is, with Xana, he got wins because of this. In Season 1, his main thing was mostly just unleashing disaster after disaster in the real world. But however, by Season 2, when they finally managed to devirtualize Aelita, we saw that he had gotten so strong, he got more powerful and much stronger because of the constant returns to the past, and was now trying to get access to Aelita's memory. And with every attempt at doing this, the group learned and adapted, but so did Xana. He found new ways, new approaches to try and beat them. Till by the end of the episode, he managed to trick them into getting Aelita alone in Lyoko, and finally stealing her memory, allowing him to gain the keys to Lyoko and escape. After that, we saw him try new approaches in Season 3, as we saw him realize, I need to get rid of Lyoko now so those kids aren't a thorn in my side. And so, you saw him try new strategies to try and delete Lyoko, find ways around handicaps, like how one of the handicaps was he couldn't possess the Lyoko warriors in the real world. So how did he get around that? By possessing them in Lyoko through the Schifazoa, and specifically Aelita. And through Aelita, he was able to one by one delete the sectors until finally by the end of the season, he destroyed Lyoko, and not only that, he gained another advantage because he managed to grab who was supposed to be their newest recruit and turn him over to his side. That, in my opinion, shows that he's smart. And by the end, he's now clearly working towards a greater goal. Hold on a second. Sorry about that, dog. But yeah, like I was saying, Xana was smart, and like we said, we got wins. Yeah, I was talking about William, how by the end he finally destroyed Lyoko and got his own warrior, and even while the group managed to kind of undo that win by bringing Lyoko back, Xana still found ways to counter them. And like I said, with each new battle, Xana learned and improved. He found ways around it, till by the end of the series, he finally pretty much got his be-all, end-all solution with the Colossus and finally destroying the Skid. In fact, By the end, the group only just barely manages to win, like they always do. Always do. The only reason they finally win is because Franz Hopper gives them an extra push, and even then, that was a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and Xana technically still got what he wanted by the end. He wanted to destroy Franz Hopper. The only reason that he still lost in the end was because it was too little too late. The group had already gotten what they needed from Franz, and as a result, the supercomputer was destroyed, and as a result, Xana, in all of his entirety, was deleted. It was actually really interesting and cool to watch this villain progress and grow throughout the series. And what makes it even better is when you learn his inception, why he was created, what kind of a program he was. Xana was designed to essentially destroy. He was a program that was designed to destroy Carthage and Lyoko when the time came. So from his inception, his only real base was to eliminate. And as a result, as Xana continued to grow and develop, having its own wants and desires and learning more about humans, it makes sense why he became as ruthless as he did. Like I said, his only drive was to destroy. That's what he was programmed to do. And everything we've seen him do in the series is him adapting and learning and finding better and more efficient ways to do it. Yeah, he doesn't fully understand the human animal in the beginning of the series, but by the end, he does understand it, and it's clear that a lot of the values he held at the beginning of the series, how he looked at everything with cold, emotionless eyes, those are things he valued most of all. Especially even during the episode I mentioned before, how he transformed into how he had a replica of Jeremy walking around. At one point, when Jeremy comes face to face with a copy, Xana tells him, you may not believe this, but I'm actually flattered to take your form. You're probably the only one of them that I actually respect. Now, he does take that compliment back because Jeremy keeps fighting, which he finds illogical and stupid. But Xana, above all, values logic and reasoning. And the only emotions that he seems to actually care about are hatred, anger, and schadenfreude. Watching others suffer. And that's what I think made him so efficient. He was cold, he was ruthless, and even when you did know more about him, you couldn't reason with him. To quote Alfred from The Dark Knight, some men can't be bought or reasoned with. Some men can't be bought or reasoned with. Some men just want to watch the world burn. And that's what Xana wanted. He wanted to watch it all burn. That was his end goal from beginning to end. That is exactly what he wanted That's exactly what he wanted. And it's kind of why I found his ultimate plan of creating a robot army to take over the world kind of lackluster, and why I kind of agree with Haley's theory of like the robot army being a distraction while Xana executed his other plan in the background, where he attacked their systems, and while humanity is dealing with the robots that are shooting at their front doors, Xana's in the back just destroying the computer systems. And don't tell me he wouldn't be able to do that with hundreds of replicas, all with their own towers and all functioning just like Lyoko. Xana could cause a lot of mayhem in the real world. So yeah, that's something that you really need to think about. And so yeah, when it comes as such, the show, it's as such, like I said, as a villain, I think Xana was perfect. He was ruthless, cruel, destructive, smart. Smart, and throughout the series, he got smarter, always learned, always found ways to adapt, and by the end, it took everything the group had to finally take him down. So I think as a villain, Xana was great. It was cool seeing what new threat he would come up with every week. Each one was always so unique, scary, dangerous, and all fitting for the type of person that Xana was. So yeah, I like that. But of course, action design. Oh yeah, another aspect I liked out of the show, the design of Lyoko. I loved the whole video game aspect of it, exploring each of the different sectors, seeing their ins and outs, how they each operated, and so forth. Seeing them all going through, seeing the group explore each of them. And because of how Lyoko worked, it was just kind of like exploring different levels of a video game, which I thought was really interesting and cool. But of course, like I said, action, a good premise, and a villain are only one half of the equation. And like I said, when the story is definitely something you kind of when the story is just there to help get to the action, one of the other aspects that can keep a show strong are the characters. And thankfully, Code Lyoko has really strong characters. And well, I think it's only fair that I talk about each of them individually. And I feel like we should probably talk about the Lyoko warriors themselves. And I feel like I should start with the ones that had the least amount of development. And for this case, the first one is Yumi. When it comes down to characterization, Yumi is strong, but in terms of overall arcs, she didn't really have a lot going for her. She didn't the most character development that she ever got was her relationship with Ulrich, and by the end of the series, that was resolved with her just telling Ulrich, "Look, I think it's better if we just stayed friends." And as a result, that kind of got the kibosh put on it. But on top of that, the only other the only other arcs that we've seen her go through in relation to her and any drama was just kind of her family, and even that stuff was resolved quickly. There was one episode where her parents briefly split up, but that was resolved by the end. There was one episode where her father lost his job, and her family had to consider moving away since she was the only one that didn't live on campus. But again, by the end of the episode, that got resolved. Though that did lead to some interesting character drama between her and Ulrich, because Ulrich made a stupid, selfish decision to try and save her by using the Return to the Past to give the family lottery numbers. So essentially, he cheated. But at the same... So, in terms of overall development, she didn't really get a lot for her. But for characterization, she's not bad. She's the most strong-willed of the group. She's always the one that looked at a problem and always tried to think of the most efficient way to take care of it. Always straightforward, always ready to go into action. And while she could get emotional at times, at the end of the day, I feel like I feel like she's the one that felt the most grounded. And a lot of her, and sometimes her reactions I felt could be a little, could push it a little. At the same time, she was always the one that for the most part, had her eye on the ball and could keep things focused. When someone acted stupid, she would call them out on it. When things need to get serious, she'd be the one to get everyone's head in the game. And when things could get mushy, she could always be the one to push people in the right direction. While she did have her moments where her emotions got the better of her, at the same time, she was the one. She felt like the reason that her as a Lyoko warrior felt strong, well-rounded, and definitely someone that could take care of herself, even if at times she did need a helping hand every now and then. And honestly, I feel like that this personality kind of reflects her decision. She's the only one of the Lyoko warriors in the final episode who immediately knew we have to turn this thing off. We have to get rid of it. This threat is gone. Let's just turn it off. We had some good times, but those are done. That reaction makes a lot of sense. To her, the Lyoko was a problem. It was a source of problems, and the only reason that she wasn't a problem that she took care of right away was because, well, the various things attached to Lyoko. In Season 1, it was Aelita. In Season 2, well, still Aelita. In Season 3, it was how they had a connection to Xana, and he was still a threat they needed to take care of, and in Season 4, similar thing. To her, the supercomputer was a necessary evil. They needed it to solve the bigger problem, but ultimately at the end of the day, she just saw it as a tool. And ultimately, the only thing that was of real worth to her without the whole journey were the experiences and the people she met along the way. It's why when Jeremy explained why he didn't want to turn off the supercomputer, she said, all that stuff's not going to go away. Everything's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's just, that's the chapter we're going to close on our lives. So nothing's going to be undone if we just turn that thing off. So I like that, and it does kind of fit into her character. So yeah, overall, while she didn't really get a lot of development in the series, at the end of the day, as a character, she was strong, independent, nice, had her issues, but overall, had her issues personally, I mean, but overall was all right. I just feel like that she should have had a lot more development than she got. Speaking of which, that brings us to the second Lyoko warrior with the least amount of development, William. And I already talked about I'd already gone over William's deal in the last video, but straight to the point, like I said, I think he was wasted potential. As an evil Lyoko warrior, I thought he was cool. I thought he was a good match for the group. It was a smart decision on Xana's part to take him while he was still a greenhorn. And seeing him fight against the group was really cool with his Buster Sword, which I still absolutely love. I liked seeing the unique powers he had. But as a character, he got the shaft, and I think was underutilized. In the throughout the majority of his time as a Lyoko warrior, he was under Xana's control, and by the time the group finally fixed him, he didn't really get to do a lot. Even when he tried to help out the group and offer some kind of aid, the only thing he really did was distract Sissy so the rest of the group could get to the factory. And even then, because the group was so apprehensive of him going back to Lyoko, they pushed him to the sidelines for emergencies, and because of that, Xana was able to possess him again, and this time in the real world. And the only reason that he didn't manage to do any major damage was because they deleted Xana before he could kill anyone. So, as a result, as a character. In terms of character arcs, William got the shaft, which I think sucks because, as a character, William, I think, was fine. Like I said, one of the major things that I think hurt him was the fact that he got 2 seasons of development, and in those 2 seasons, they established just what kind of a person William was. He was a troublemaker, kind of a delinquent, tenacious, but never pushing too far. While Yumi made it clear she wasn't really interested in him, he never stopped trying to woo her. And it wasn't like to the point of stalker levels of, no means yes, right? No. He tried to always be respectful and nice and never tried to push too hard. Even in the final episode, because we do see him briefly in the final episode, it's clear he still has feelings for Yumi and he's still trying to push the feelings, but at the same time, he doesn't try to force them on her either. It's just he's trying to make a connection, but it's clear she's not going for it. Which in some ways is creepy, in some ways is kind of admirable, especially since he doesn't ever force Yumi to choose him. He never says, "Look, Yumi, I want you to choose me. Choose me. I'm always there for you." But yeah, blah blah blah. No. At one point, hell, I even remember one point when he admitted to Ulrich begrudgingly that Yumi chose Ulrich over him. The dude was a little angry about it, but he never let it get to him, and he genuinely was still a nice guy. And that's one of the aspects of him that I think worked. While he was a delinquent and was a troublemaker, when push came to shove, they showed he was a very strong guy. When Xana devirtualized crabs in the real world, he helped the group fend them off. When Xana unleashed a zombie plague, he helped rally the students. Again, they established a lot of what made him a good character in the first 2 seasons, but then in the last season, he got the shaft, and any attempt to have him be a part of the main cast was shoved aside, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity. I talked about this a lot in the last episode and how it disappointed me, but I feel like there could have been a lot more there. Maybe have him deal with some PTSD from losing so many months of his life. Have him try and get back to the group. Maybe have some of that apprehension they had from him early, but little by little he earns back their trust by actually being a valuable asset. But again, even in the final episode when we do briefly see him, he still remembers Lyoko, and what I do like is that Yumi does not give him the cold shoulder. They actually talk, and he says, "Hey, did you guys turn it off yet?" And Yumi says no, and he's shocked, like, "Wait, why wouldn't you? That thing has caused nothing but problems." Which, honestly, his reaction I think makes the most sense. Aside from Aelita, who we'll get to, he lost a lot to the supercomputer. By joining the Lyoko Warriors, he spent months of his life trapped under the villain's sway, and by the time he returned, there was a lot of things in his life that he had to deal with. The fallout from what his clone did, having to try and catch up with all the things he missed. I feel like there was so much they could have done there, but they didn't. As a result, he feels like wasted potential. So much that they could have done with him, but at the end of the day, they didn't. And it's disappointing. And it's one of the reasons, and I'm just glad that Code Lyoko Evolutions made him a regular member of the group. So, yeah. Which also brings us to the last member of the group that didn't really get a lot of development, Odd. However, unlike Yumi and William, who I feel like they could have used more development, Odd honestly did not need a lot. Odd was arrogance and brashness incarnate, and he was proud of that fact. Everything about Odd was just in your face. Definitely, I'm the best guy in the room. He was always overconfident, snarky, so sure of his abilities to the point where anything he didn't excel in, he would still swear he could do, and little by little he would try and get better at. The guy was a jack of many trades, and a lot of the trades he was legitimately good at. And I think that a lot of what that personality and that archetype had to do with how he was raised. When we briefly saw his parents a few episodes ago, we saw that the way they raised him was essentially just support him, help him reach his goals. They were always super supportive of what Odd could do, and as a result, and being raised in that environment, you can see why Odd is as capable as he is. Because the stuff he's good at, he's really good at. And he's so confident in his abilities and so well-rounded in that regard. And while Odd definitely is annoyed that he doesn't have any issues with his parents, again, as I pointed out in that vlog, having parents like that ultimately is what shaped Odd into the person he was. Who can be annoying, who can probably have a high opinion of himself, but for what he can do well. And the stuff he lacks in is just stuff he genuinely has no interest in, like school. He doesn't have any interest in school, so he puts no effort into it. His parents, of course, while his parents say that he could be good at school, it's just that he's too humble. I think they're just half right. I think if he was interested, he could probably he might be as good as Jeremy. Again, it's still Odd we're talking about, but it just doesn't interest him. He'd rather focus his attention on skateboarding or fighting, because he's a skilled fighter. On Lyoko, he was a natural fighter. He knew how to work around a battlefield, what to do, when was the perfect time to strike, etc. He was not a bad fighter, But the thing that made him that kept him from being annoying, in my opinion, was his heart. Despite all that brashness and arrogance and his high opinion of himself, one thing about Odd that you could always count on was his dedication to his friends. Whenever anyone in the Lyoko group was in danger, Odd would go in and help them, no questions asked. And I think a good example of this was in the episode where Odd got split into 3. When each of the when the Odd clones tried going about each of their daily lives, they each found that 3 Odds doing odd things definitely clashed with each other, and they got into arguments. However, once Xana launched an attack and the group wanted to get all 3 of them to Lyoko because, well, that's how they could merge them back together, the Odds immediately just dropped all their issues and began working together to try and find ways to get out of the situations they were in and get to the factory. Because, again, their friends were in danger and they knew that there was a bigger threat. So I liked that. And that, I think, was the root of Odd's character that I think made him so endearing. Because for all of his brashness and for all of his arrogance, he was really good. Like I said, everything that he was talented in, he was super talented in. And when it came to his friends, there was never any doubt that if they were in trouble, he would come running. There was only one episode that I think that really dealt with this type of behavior and have it clashing. Like in the episode when Kanak got the exchange student. I think she was a friend of Sissy's, yeah. Just like in that episode, Odd formed a relationship with her, and that relationship wound up clashing with his duties as a Lyoko warrior, to the point where he showed her the factory, and her meddling screwed with a program that Jeremy was working on. And as a result, it began infecting the supercomputer and affecting the Lyoko warriors. And as a result, Odd almost got expelled from the group, and for a brief second, he almost sided with his girlfriend, but as you do, at the end he realizes, no, my friends are more important, and he goes to save them. And by the end of the episode, he pretty much tells the group, I understand if you don't want me in the group anymore. That's again showing his heart. And like I said in that episode, one of the things that I think showcased that was that when they were talking about who would you be willing to die for, and likewise, this girl kept trying to pull Odd away from his friends, but at the end of the day, the ties with his friends are the strongest, because by the end of the episode, he does almost die for them as he dives into the digital sea to try and save Aelita. Oh, almost dies in the digital sea. And again, that shows just how strong his ties are with them. So, yeah, while Odd didn't really didn't get any development in the show, I feel like he really didn't need any. He was brash, arrogant, fun to watch, and ultimately was just a good person in general. So, there you go. Which also brings us to his roommate, Ulrich. Ulrich did get development as the show went on. In the beginning of the show, he was my least favorite Lyoko warrior. He was, like, while he could act strong and stern and definitely more astute, the downside of having that personality was because he, like Odd, thought he was better than you. But whereas with Odd, that genuinely came from skill, for Ulrich, it was because he was a jerk. And in the beginning, I was not really willing to give him a lot of legroom for that. And again, to be fair, he's a teenager. Teenagers do stupid things and can act stupid all the time. But for Ulrich, his big problem was that he always expected things to go his way, whether you wanted them to or not. And for a while, it always annoyed me whenever there would be an episode with him acting like a jackass for no apparent reason. Then we meet his dad, who, as we see, is a perfectionist who pushes his son to always strive to be the best at something, and if his son is not the best at something, he considers that a failure. And when you realize that that's how his dad is like, suddenly a lot of Ulrich's character makes sense. For Ulrich, he was always we can only assume this, but odds are that with Ulrich's father, he was probably always told to aim high, to aim for the top, to always be the best, because when you are the best, things can go your way. And so with that constant pressure and always being told you need to be the best at everything, of course Ulrich would turn out the way he did. Because when things did not go his way in the beginning of the show, as in the first 2 seasons of the show, he acted like a jerk. He acted cold to the point. He acted cold, distant, acting like nothing really mattered. To the point where in some episodes he actually became a detriment to whatever mission the group was on. And it was annoying. But when you actually see how he was raised and what kind of a person his dad is, at the same time you also feel sorry for him. But at the same time, being a Lyoko warrior is what helped him grow. His attitude is what ultimately led to him and Yumi ultimately splitting up, but as the series went on, he little by little learned that this attitude could not fly, and that what really mattered to him were his friends, to the point where as he began to realize he needed to put his ego aside if he wanted to keep these people in his life. It's why when season 3 happened and Yumi finally said, "Our relationship is a mess, we should just be friends," he didn't freak out. He wasn't happy about it, but he wanted to still have Yumi be in his life. And it's clear throughout the rest of the series that throughout seasons 3 and 4 that Ulrich and Yumi do still care about each other, but they both are aware that what being in a relationship could entail and what it could lead to. And they've already been down that road, and so if they want to get back on it, they need to work towards it, build something healthier, stronger. And as the series goes on, we see Ulrich actually growing and becoming better, to the point where he's able to push his own ego aside, where he realizes, I shouldn't need to strive to be the best, I should just strive to be good. And we see that exemplified in one episode when Ulrich's father is called and he chews Ulrich out, telling him, you need to be the best. Stop hanging out with your friends. They're probably a bad influence on you. And Ulrich's response is pretty much to tell him to shut the F up and just walk out so he can go help them. That shows that Ulrich, at the end of the day, that shows the full zenith of Ulrich's development. He's not how little by little being a Lyoko warrior made him better. And I feel like it's that kind of, and I think that helps feed into why he didn't want to turn the supercomputer off. Because when Odd asks him about it, Ulrich says, I feel like a hero. I forgot to talk about Odd. For Odd, his major reason for why he didn't want to turn off the supercomputer is because he liked the action, liked fighting the monsters, liked being a hero. Which ultimately Ulrich is able to tell him, you're still awesome even without it. And without Lyoko, you'd have time for all this extra cool stuff you like, such as fighting or skating. And that ultimately helps convince Odd, yeah, you're right. You know what? I'd still be awesome even without it. But for Ulrich, Lyoko is what made him better. When he says that Lyoko made him feel like a hero, I think what he really means is it made me better. Because a hero is someone who is supposed to be selfless, who thinks of others before they think of themselves, who does the right thing just simply because it's the right thing, or because there are people they want to protect. And for Ulrich, as the series went on, that became his driving character trait, wanting to protect his friends. He wanted to do the right. Being in Lyoko Warrior helped make him better, and as a result, him feeling that turning off the supercomputer might put him back to that mindset could very easily be a reason why he didn't want to turn it off. He probably thought, maybe without Lyoko, I wouldn't feel like a hero anymore. I'd feel useless. I'd feel angry that I need to meet these expectations again. But ultimately, what convinces him not to is the fact that they still have those experiences and they can still keep going. Because he does confide in Yumi that he doesn't want to lose any of what they had together. All those moments they shared on Lyoko. But Yumi just tells him, we'll have more moments. And ultimately, that's what finally convinces Ulrich, yeah, maybe we should turn it off. Because turning off the supercomputer is not going to change. Is not going to change him back to who he was. Turning on at the end of the day, there's going to be more moments, and he's going to continue growing, and always for the better, as long as these people are in his life. And I think that's a good thing, and I like that. It's sweet. Which also brings us to Jeremy. While Jeremy never actually went to Lyoko, save for maybe a couple times, he was still a major character and a major force for the Lyoko group, acting as their tech support and always offering them technical guidance on the supercomputer, how it worked, creating programs that could counter something Xana created, figuring out how they could get in, learning how to virtualize things in, adding new stuff, etc. He was always trying to think of new solutions to keep everything running. And his character arc involved his relationship with Aelita, as well as coming out of his shell. One of Jeremy's major character traits in the series is that he is smart. He is intelligent. He said at one point in this episode, he was the big brain of Caddick Academy. One of the best students, if not the best student academically. One of the best students academically. But a consequence of this is that he was introverted, very introverted. He didn't interact with people very often, and even when he did, it was usually just like the briefest of interactions. Keep in mind, in the Xana Awakens two-parter, the only reason that the rest of the group got involved was because Jeremy, who was still studying supercomputer, got attacked by Xana. Ulrich happened to walk in and see it, saved him, and thus wanted answers to what was going on. And through Ulrich, they wanted Odd and Yumi got pulled in, and thus the group was formed from there. As a result of this, Jeremy doesn't really fully understand, and throughout the series, had moments where he didn't really understand what you had to do to maintain friendships. Because odds are, as a genius introvert, he probably never talked with a lot of people. Keep in mind, like, when he first interacted with Aelita, what helped, I think, attract him to her initially was the fact that she was in a computer. That he thought that she was an AI. But she was probably one of the first people that Jeremy, and as a result, Jeremy was interested in learning more about her, and through that and because of that interest, it allowed him to continue growing as well, to become better. Aelita was the first real friend he had, and through her, he made other friends. But even with Aelita, he made mistakes. A lot of things that show that he really did not understand how to interact with people. He would usually put his concerns over other people, or when tackling what for many others would be like a stressful subject, he would just kind of brush it off because to him it wasn't important. Like when Aelita wanted to go to Lyoko to search for her father in season 3, but Jeremy just wrote her off saying, no, he's probably dead, let's just not do it. Not even considering for a second how Aelita would take that, considering that Franz Hopper was her father. Jeremy had those moments throughout the series, and part of his character journey was growing and realizing that he was stronger with friends. That being with these people wasn't a detriment. That having these people in his life was actually making him better. And with every mistake he made, he did try and find ways to work around it. In one episode where Aelita wanted to audition as an opening act for the Subsonics, Jeremy tried telling her, no, we've got to focus on making this program, it's not important. But and Aelita ultimately begrudgingly accepted this logic because, yeah, what they were doing was important. And by the end of the episode, when they finished, she missed the audition. But Jeremy also realized Jeremy, by the end of the episode, realized that was important. And so when they finally took out the threat and turned back time, Jeremy instead decided. When he and Aelita were going to go back to working on the program, sent her audition in advance. And so as a result, the Subsonics went and got her. And he never told her about that. He was the one that sent it in. He just sat back. And that I think is a good showcase of how his character grew, because even at the end of the series, he is not interested in that sort of thing. He's interested in science and technology and programs and so forth. But seeing Aelita happy made him happy. And ultimately, and I feel like that's part of the reason why he didn't want to turn the supercomputer off. The bonds he made. Before Lyoko, he was just this quiet, he was just the smart kid that no one talked to, no friends. But with Lyoko, he was a hero. he helped people, and he grew. He made friends, and he made friends, and he doesn't want to lose these people because he turned the supercomputer off. He wants them to stay together. He wants to still be friends with them, and he feels that without Lyoko, that all that would go away. Again, that's ultimately, he tells this to Yumi, and Yumi dissuades his fears by saying, yeah, it's like, no, all that won't be undone. We'll all still be friends even without Lyoko, which I think is just really nice and very sweet, and I think really does add more depth to his character. And again, I think that's really nice. Just seeing him grow and change from this quiet introvert who didn't really fully understand people to being the center of this group who did his best to make sure everyone was safe and to keep everyone together, because to him these were probably the most important people in his life. Which also brings us to the character that I think got the most development, Aelita. Aelita was the one that kind of got lost the most in the series. While William definitely got lost the second most, because again he lost months of his life to Xana. Aelita kind of gets him beat because she lost 2 decades of hers. For Aelita, her life was pretty much ruined because of Lyoko ruined Aelita's life even before she went into the supercomputer. It was designed by her father as a government project and it was essentially meant to just do all these interesting things. That through Lyoko they could essentially create programs that could screw with the real world, alter reality, etc. And it was a dangerous project, that as it got more and more dangerous, the risk to Franz Hopper and his family grew as well, and as a result of that, Aelita lost a lot. They imply in the series that, well, I think, or they just outright said it, that one of the things that because of Lyoko and Carthage and all of that, Aelita lost her mother to the government, which resulted in Franz Hopper having to move and change location while he worked on the project. And ultimately that came crashing on his head when the government still came knocking at his door, and so Franz took Aelita to Lyoko. And ultimately that continued getting worse because because Xana, a program that Franz created, turned on him and trapped him and Aelita in Lyoko, making it even further getting worse when Xana took a portion of Aelita's memory, to the point where when Jeremy turns on the supercomputer, she doesn't know who she is or where she is. All her life was literally stolen because of her father's mistakes. And a good chunk of the series is her coming to terms with this and growing, trying to regain a sense of who she is, where she came from, and and by the end, and ultimately where she's going. In the first season, the main priority was getting her into the real world. And when she did enter the real world, one of the things that she wanted to do was have a life. It's why she and Jeremy clash, because while in Lyoko, of course, she would be worrying about data and transmissions, because that's all she would have to worry about. In the real world, she wanted to try new things. And for Jeremy, he saw those things as boring. He didn't need to. But Aelita wanted to do more. And as the series went on, she developed more into a person. And at the beginning of the series, she was very kind, very considerate, always considered other people's needs before her own. And as the series went on, that never changed. She always cared about other people and wanted them all to be happy. But little by little, we saw her get more emotional, having more stakes involved with what everybody was doing. Again, when she wanted to have her own she wound up getting her own hobbies, having her own relationships, doing her own thing, and seeing her grow throughout the series and seeing her reclaim that, I think, is sweet. But ultimately, when she does regain her memories, that opens up a whole new chapter, because this is a part of her life that she's lost for so long. And as the series goes on, she's just doing her best to not only build on what she's lost, but also regain some of that. Because throughout the whole series, one of her major journeys was trying to get her father back. And as the series went on, that battle became more and more desperate, to the point where it definitely felt like it was never going to happen. And by the end, it almost didn't. She now almost never saw her father again. And while she did, and she ultimately, I think, canceled the search because she did find her father again, and she realized he's in hiding because Xana will kill him if he ever comes out. At the same time, her character journey was all about moving forward. putting the past behind her, allowing all these terrible things that happened in her life to just be done. With Xana, while she lost her and it's one of the reasons why she didn't want to turn off the computer, because by turning it off, that's like truly saying goodbye to everything, because that was something her father created. But ultimately, what convinces her that the supercomputer needs to be turned off is the fact that even though all that stuff is gone, she's built something new. She has a life in Caddock. She has friends that care about her. She has interests. She has hobbies. She can live her own life, not tied down by the sins of her father. And I feel like that's the most dramatic thing. And I feel like and as a result, I feel like that she's the one that definitely got the lion's share of development, especially in the penultimate episode when she finally had to actually say goodbye to her father. Actually, that's another flaw I'll say. I wish we could have seen more of that, her dealing with the fallout of her father. So, yeah. But again, from her perspective, it was just about building a new life, regaining her identity, forming something that wasn't just forming an identity, being herself. And I think and ultimately her relationship with Lyoko, with her father, Xana, all of that was really interesting. It definitely made you feel a lot more very sorry for her, and I feel like that she had that when it came to her, I think she had the most emotional depth and most compelling backstory out of all of them. As for side characters, I think that's another flaw. I think another flaw with the show would probably be a lot of the side characters are superficial. A lot of them don't really do a lot in the grand scheme of things. In fact, and while I can definitely name a few here and there, not a lot come to mind. Like, I can think of Millie and Tamiya, but they didn't really have a lot of character focused episodes beyond the first episode, even then that was kind of it. After that, they're just the cub reporters always looking for some kind of big scoop in Caddock so they can sell their papers. But then likewise, as the series went on, they really just were there, occasionally offering some kind of resistance or problems, but otherwise just the reporters. There was also Nicholas and Herb, and those guys, and while they definitely had some things going for them as sidekicks for Sissy, like Nicholas apparently could Herb could apparently rival Jeremy in terms of technological prowess, and Herb wanting to join that little band that the Lyoko group briefly formed. At the end of the day, they're just Sissy's sidekicks and are just there to act as like comic relief and so forth. In fact, honestly, the only two side characters that got something akin to development are the only two characters that briefly joined the Lyoko group, Sissy and Jim. For Sissy, her development mostly involved her heart, so to speak. In terms of character, as I said, like in the beginning of the series, she was the school bitch. She was the principal's daughter, spoiled, rotten, thinks she could do whatever the hell she wants, and for the most part she can, and always thinks that things need to go her way. And for the majority of the series, that was what she was. She was always a jerk, always doing her best to get to try and screw with the Lyoko group, sabotage them, figure out what they were doing to the point where she became a hindrance, or to the point where she would try and get them expelled, or would try and just be a complete and utter jackass to them because she wanted to be a part of their little group or whatever. For the most part, she was just an annoying bitch who just considered her own opinion and self-worth over others, to the point where you really did not like her at all. However, for me, the most interesting part of her character were the parts when she was put in mortal peril. One of the things that I genuinely liked about her that they showcased more in the first season than in others was that under all that bitchiness and ego, she had a heart. It was buried very deep, but there was a heart in there. When people were in danger, she was concerned. I remember there was an episode where Xana was causing earthquakes that were leveling Caddock, and a majority of the students got out, except for Millie, Tamiya, and Odd. And when Sissy realized that they weren't getting out, she was genuinely worried and afraid that they were probably dead. Which I think is really nice. Or there was one episode where Sissy, Oric, and Yumi, I think, were trapped on a bus that Xana hijacked, earlier in the episode, Sissy stole Ulrich's diary and tried to use it as blackmail material, but when the greater threat with Xana and the bus happened, she actually said, "Ulrich, I'm sorry about what happened, but if you need my help right now, I'll do whatever you need me to do." When in times of crisis, Sissy had a level head. She could be calm and collected. She could be understanding of other people. And when things got bad, she never was like, "What about me? What about me?" She was always concerned with everybody else. If there was a thing there that was threatening lives, she did her best to ensure that people were safe, or she was concerned about them. In none of those situations, she could be reasonable, helpful, and nice. But again, a major problem is that she was a bitch. She was self-centered the most of the time. And while there were other moments in the series where we saw that heart shine through, the majority of the rest of the time, she was just like, it's like, "Oh, what are they doing? I don't like it. Daddy, I think they're up to something. Expel them." It was annoying. And as that aspect of her personality got more emphasis over the kind part of the kind part of her character, I just started loathing everything about her just as much as the main characters did. And it's ultimately that personality trait that I think made her not become a Ryoko warrior. Like I said, because as we saw in the Xana Awakens two-parter, she was going to be a Lyoko warrior. She was there at the inception. She learned about the supercomputer, but the only reason that she didn't stay on was because she blabbed about the supercomputer and told people. Though, to be fair, she was attacked by an electrical orb. I think tell me someone who's sane who can keep a calm and level head after that, and I'll show you a crazy person. And so I'll give her that. So I'll give her some leeway there. But the rest of the time, she was not cooperative, not nice. I can understand why they wouldn't make her a Lyoko warrior, because the number of times that she was nice, I could probably count on two hands, with only two hands. That's all. She was not a kind person. Was a complete bitch. And while she had her moments of humanity, as the series went on, they became fewer and far between, and as a result, I didn't care for her either. However, though, to counterbalance that, we have the other temporary Lyoko warrior, Jim. Like Sissy, he was only a Lyoko warrior for 2 episodes, but he was also the one that seemed to have the most development out of all the other side characters. For Jim, his major character was about caring for others. He was like, his general character was that of a doofus. He was an old guy who didn't understand the ways of the kids these days, or would miss something that was obvious to others. But one major aspect of Jim's character that I think was admirable, he was always selfless. Whenever there was danger arising, he would always prioritize the safety of the students over himself, to the point where even if it looked like he was going to die, he would say, "Damn the consequences," and go charging in. In one episode, when the group realized they probably needed extra training and they went to Jim to put them through boot camp, he not only helped them try and improve, but when the group was attacked by a wolf that Xana was controlling, despite the fact that he had been injured early in the episode, he was still going in ready to fight this thing and keep it from killing these kids, just because it was his job, not just as their coach, but also as their teacher. And as a Lyoko and when he was briefly part of the Lyoko group, that same attitude went through. When Xana was devirtualizing Cankerlots into the real world, he was just bashing them one after the other, and he was bashing them one after the other, and when the group saw how much damage he was doing, he said, "Hey, if you go into Lyoko, you can fix this, right?" It's like, "Yeah, then go in there now. I'm gonna go take care of more of these things." And he wound up running to the school, and even when and what did he do? He was egging the Kangarlites to shoot at him, because every second they were shooting at him was another second they were not shooting at students. And even as they kept shooting at Jim, and he kept getting weaker and weaker, to the point where you knew that just took a couple more shots that would kill him, he was still saying, "Come on, is that all you got? Come on." Like, that is the type of character that Jim was. And honestly, that's what made him so interesting. He was a good person. He could be kind of an idiot in some cases, but he was genuinely a good person. Going back to when he was a Lyoko warrior, when Jeremy explained Lyoko and how everything worked, he was actually understanding. When he learned that the reason that they couldn't turn on the supercomputer yet until they freed Aelita from the virus, he didn't like, "Well, then what about my job?" He wasn't like, "Well, what about my job? What am I going to do now?" No. He was perfectly understanding. Jeremy told him, "I'll tell Principal Bellpaw about the supercomputer once we turn it off." And he was like, "Okay, fine. I know I can't turn this off without her being in danger, so I'll keep my mouth shut and probably just camp out here for a while. So I like that, and that was the basis of his character. I think another really interesting thing is that I thought was amusing is that he always seemed to have some kind of hidden past to him. Like there was something, like he always seemed to have something going on. Like he always seemed to be knowledgeable about all these various topics, and you only got the briefest of hints of what would happen of what happened in his past. What was he like as a young man? What did he do that gained him all this experience? And whenever anyone asked him about it, his only response is, "I'd rather not talk about it." It's amusing, and you never get any full answers about his past, which ironically makes it more interesting and makes you want to know more about him. So yeah, as a side character, I think Jim was nice. Definitely very courageous, had a lot of nice moments. So yeah. So yeah, overall, like I said, while the story for Code Lyoko was definitely felt like it could have done more, like I feel like they should have done, like they should have had more with it. What it lacked in that area, it made up for in so many others. The action was great. The designs for Lyoko, impressive. The characters, well-rounded and fun. The villain, very intense and really good. The tension was palpable. The drama was really nice. Ultimately, while I will admit, Code Lyoko is not a show that I enjoyed talking about, as a viewer, I had fun watching it. It was a joy just kind of seeing the action, seeing what Xana would create every week and how the group would have to survive it until they could deactivate the next tower. Whenever, and as they kept getting closer and closer, I was always on the edge of my seat thinking, come on, come on, do it now. I always wanted to see a conclusion. I always wanted to see the characters make it out alive. And even if the story felt like it was lacking in that area, and lacking in substance in some places, what it made up for what Code Lyoko lacked in that, it made up for with so much else. And those aspects, I think, make it a great show to watch. And like I said, those aspects are amazing action, great premise, cool designs, amazing, cool powers, well-written characters, a strong villain that grew, rising tension throughout the episodes and the series overall that made you want to keep tuning back in to see more. Overall, while Code Lyoko is not a show that I recommend talking about as an episode-by-episode basis, as a series overall, I think it's a fun time. It's not, I don't think it's like the greatest thing ever, but I can see why Code Lyoko is still fondly remembered even years later. There are fans of this show. I've seen a few of them on Twitter and even followed them, and they all have something really creative and interesting to talk about for the show. And even rewatching it like now, I've come to appreciate certain aspects of it now more than I did when I was a kid. It's just that, again, for me, the lack of the story made it kind of one of those things that was a little hard to talk about on a video-by-video basis. So if you want to go back and watch Code Lyoko, I recommend watching it in chunks. I don't recommend watching it episode by episode on a weekly or daily basis, because I feel... So, as such, if you want to get more bang for your buck, watch it in chunks. Binge watch it until you feel you've had your fill. Take a break, then continue on with another batch of episodes. So, yeah. At the end of the day, it was still a good show. Definitely recommend, but don't watch it the way I did. Just don't. Watching it the way I did led me to getting bored at certain points, and I don't like saying that. I genuinely don't. I know people are going to be like, what? You were bored? Like, no, like, again, it's just when you talk, it's like, you try talking about each episode one by one, and then you tell me how well it works. And then maybe you'll have an argument. I don't know. I feel like I'm being a jerk here. I'm sorry if I'm being a jerk. I'm not trying to be a jerk. Because overall, I did enjoy the show a lot. I'm glad that so many other people do too. And I feel like this is still a show that should be remembered and talked about years later. It's just that there are certain aspects of it that I think could have been very much improved. And while there were a lot of aspects that I think worked and definitely made the show memorable, those other aspects definitely made it a little bit more difficult. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's been a long journey getting here, but it was an interesting ride in the end. If you watched these vlogs from beginning to end, then I thank you for joining me on this journey. If you at any point decided that you wanted to check out Code Lyoko based on my vlogs, I think I'm proud. And for any who did watch these with me or watched something and looked at Lyoko and then looked at the show and rethought an aspect of it, I'm glad I was able to help you with that. Or if you or maybe you decided to just tune in and then just decide to turn off your brain and listen to me rambling on for maybe 20 or so minutes while you eventually fell asleep. I'm glad I was able to do that too. Or maybe you just didn't like the vlogs, in which case you're free to have your opinion. You're free to have your opinion. Like I say, these are very unprofessional and they're just me rambling for an amount of time. So yeah, I can kind of see why people wouldn't like it, but if you did enjoy these vlogs and watched them with me and watched them from beginning to end, I'm glad that you were able to join me on this journey. It was a long time, it was a long ride, but we're at the end. We're at the end now, and I can say that I don't regret it. Like I said, although I mean, I do admit that it was probably it was a difficult ride at certain points, but I don't regret taking it. So, if you did enjoy these vlogs, I thank you for watching and sticking with me through them. And if you're interested in seeing me talk about other shows or franchises, I've done other various vlogs. You can probably go back and check out my first vlog, the Ben 10 retrospectives, or you can see me talk about Ben 10 Alien Force and the Alien Force retrospectives. Or if you want to see me talk about other superheroes, then you can see me talk. Then I also have the Phantom perspectives, where I look at Danny Phantom, or the MCU perspectives, which are still technically ongoing. So yeah, if you like my vlogs, you can go check those out. And to everyone who watched these vlogs on Twitter and Tumblr, I thank you for watching them, and I hope that I was able to provide some form of entertainment. If I didn't, totally acceptable. I get it, but yeah, I can't really think of much else to say. I guess for the future, I guess if I want to talk about where we're going to go next, well, obviously I'm going to be starting another vlog after this. Next week I'm going to be going back to the MCU perspectives because I'm going to be doing a vlog on Eternals. But after that, I want to start a new. After that, for the next vlog, I admit I'm feeling a little nostalgic. I want to talk about Ben 10 again, albeit we're going to be looking at something. We're not going to be looking at a series this time. Instead, we're going to be looking at a certain aspect of the Ben 10 franchise, certain episodes and specials. If you want to know what those are, I recommend just tuning in a couple weeks and finding out. But needless to say, this vlog series, the next vlog series is one that I've been actually really looking forward to for a long time, so I'm glad that I'll finally be able to do it. So if you're interested in that, I recommend coming back in 2 weeks and checking it out. But if not, if you're done, if you don't want to see anymore, if you think this is the last you'll see of me, I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and thank you for letting me be a part of your life for this long. And as always, I'll see you next time. Take care.